In ancient times, history remembers many kings and conquerors, but very few queens have captured the world's imagination as powerfully as Cleopatra VII. She has been called a seductress, a manipulator, a goddess, and a doomed lover. For centuries, her story has been retold in plays, paintings, and films, often wrapped in layers of myth. Yet behind the legends lies the real Cleopatra, an ambitious, brilliant, and determined ruler who fought to keep Egypt independent at a time when the Roman Republic was devouring the world. This is not just the story of a love affair with Caesar or Antony. It is the story of a woman who inherited a kingdom on the brink of collapse, and who tried, against impossible odds, to save it. Cleopatra's life was a clash of politics and passion, war and propaganda, history and myth. And in her rise and fall, we see the twilight of ancient Egypt itself. Cleopatra VII was born in 69 BCE into the Ptolemaic dynasty, a line of Greek rulers who had governed Egypt for nearly 3 centuries. The dynasty began with Ptolemy I Soter, one of Alexander the Great's generals, who took control of Egypt after Alexander's death in 323 BC. Unlike their Egyptian subjects, the Ptolemies spoke Greek, lived as Hellenistic monarchs, and intermarried within their own family to preserve power. By Cleopatra's time, this dynasty was crumbling. The court was filled with intrigue, assassinations, and rival claimants. Egypt, though still wealthy, was no longer the mighty empire it once had been. Its survival depended on balancing between powerful neighbors, especially Rome, which was expanding eastward. From birth, Cleopatra was destined for politics. She grew up in the Palace of Alexandria, the dazzling capital built by Alexander the Great. The city was home to the famous Library of Alexandria and the towering Pharaoh's Lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The city was cosmopolitan, a hub of trade and scholarship. But beyond its shining towers and marble columns, there were dangers. Egypt was caught in the crossfire of Roman ambition. The young Cleopatra knew she could not rely on any foreign power, so she took it upon herself to learn the language and customs of her people. Unlike most Ptolemaic rulers, she made the effort to learn the Egyptian language, along with Greek and several others. She could converse with foreign emissaries without interpreters, a rare skill in her time. She was not only intelligent but also charismatic. Ancient sources, even those hostile to her, admit that her presence was captivating. Plutarch, the Roman historian, wrote that her beauty was not in itself incomparable, but the contact of her presence was irresistible. In other words, Cleopatra's power came less from physical beauty than from wit, charm, and intellect. When her father Ptolemy XII Eliades died in 51 BCE, Cleopatra, then only 18 years old, inherited the throne alongside her younger brother Ptolemy XIII, who was about 10. As was tradition, they were meant to rule jointly and even to marry each other, as Ptolemaic siblings often did to preserve the bloodline. But the reality was brutal. Egypt was heavily in debt to Rome. The throne was contested by court officials who sought to use the boy king as their puppet. Soon Cleopatra was pushed aside. In 48 BCE, she was forced to flee Alexandria while her brother's supporters took control. Exiled but not defeated, Cleopatra gathered an army in Syria. She prepared to march back to Egypt and reclaim her crown. Yet events in Rome would soon change everything. In that same year, Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in Rome, arrived in Alexandria. He came not for Cleopatra but to pursue his rival Pompey the Great during the Roman Civil War. Pompey had fled to Egypt, seeking refuge with Ptolemy XIII, but instead of offering him sanctuary, the young king's advisors had Pompey murdered, hoping to please Caesar. When Caesar arrived and saw Pompey's severed head, he was horrified. The act, meant to secure his favor, only disgusted him, and in this moment of political chaos, Cleopatra made her move. Legend says she had herself smuggled into the palace, rolled inside a carpet or perhaps a linen sack. When unrolled before Caesar, the young queen emerged dramatically, a gesture both desperate and daring. Whether myth or truth, the story captures the boldness of her character. She needed Caesar's support to reclaim her throne, and she succeeded. Caesar, impressed by her intelligence and charisma, decided to back her. This sparked a civil war between Cleopatra, supported by Caesar, and her brother's forces. After months of brutal fighting in Alexandria, Ptolemy XIII drowned in the Nile while trying to flee. Cleopatra was restored to the throne, now ruling jointly with another younger brother, Ptolemy XIV. But she was no longer merely a queen of Egypt. She had become Caesar's ally, and soon, his lover. In 47 BCE, Cleopatra gave birth to a son, Caesarion Little Caesar, whom she declared was the child of Julius Caesar. Though Caesar never officially recognized the boy, Cleopatra's claim strengthened her position. She even traveled to Rome, staying in a villa across the Tiber there. She shocked the conservative Romans with her luxurious style and regal presence. To some, she represented exotic allure, to others a dangerous foreign influence. The Roman poet Cicero wrote of her with disdain, calling her arrogant. When Caesar was assassinated in 44 BCE, Cleopatra's world collapsed again. Rome plunged into civil war, and Egypt, caught in the middle, was once more vulnerable. Her co-ruler, Ptolemy XIV, soon died, possibly poisoned. Cleopatra elevated her son Caesarion as co-ruler, making him the symbolic heir of both Egypt and Rome. But now she needed a new protector. That protector came in the form of Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general and one of the 3 men who ruled Rome after his death. Alongside Octavian and Lepidus, in 41 BCE, Antony summoned Cleopatra to the city of Tarsus in Asia Minor, demanding her allegiance. Cleopatra, never one to be intimidated, arrived in a golden barge decorated with purple sails, dressed as the goddess Isis. Ancient writers describe the scene as theatrical, even divine. Antony was captivated. Their meeting sparked not only a political alliance but also a legendary romance. Cleopatra hosted Antony in Alexandria with feasts of unimaginable luxury. One famous tale tells of her dissolving a priceless pearl in vinegar and drinking it, to prove she could give the most expensive banquet in history. For years, Cleopatra and Antony were inseparable. They had 3 children together and even formed what they called the Inimitable Livers, a society of pleasure and extravagance. But behind the revelry was serious politics. Cleopatra needed Antony's military strength to secure Egypt's independence. Antony, in turn, needed Egypt's wealth to fund his campaigns against Rome's eastern enemies. Yet their union alarmed Rome. Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, portrayed Antony as bewitched by a foreign queen, betraying Roman values. Propaganda spread of Cleopatra as a seductress, enslaving Antony, turning him against his homeland. By 32 BCE, tensions reached the breaking point. Octavian declared war not on Antony directly, but on Cleopatra. This was a clever move. Romans might forgive Antony's ambition, but they would not tolerate a foreign queen threatening their republic. The decisive confrontation came at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. Antony and Cleopatra commanded a massive fleet, but Octavian's forces, led by Agrippa, outmaneuvered them. In the midst of battle, Cleopatra's ships suddenly withdrew. Antony followed, abandoning his men. Whether it was a tactical retreat or a desperate flight, the result was disaster. Their remaining forces surrendered. The dream of an Egyptian-Roman empire under Antony and Cleopatra was shattered. The following year, Octavian invaded Egypt. Antony, misled by false news that Cleopatra had died, fell on his own sword. Mortally wounded, he was carried to Cleopatra's mausoleum where he died in her arms. Cleopatra, now a prisoner, refused to be paraded through Rome as a trophy of conquest. In August of 30 BCE, she took her own life. Ancient sources say she used an asper venomous Egyptian cobra, allowing the serpent to bite her. Others suggest she used poison concealed in a hairpin. However it happened, her death was dramatic, fitting the legend she had become. With her died not just a queen, but an entire era. Egypt was annexed by Rome, becoming a province of the empire. Caesarion, her son with Julius Caesar, was executed by Octavian, who would soon become Augustus, the first Roman emperor. Cleopatra was the last pharaoh of Egypt. With her death, 3,000 years of pharaonic rule came to an end. For centuries, Cleopatra's story has fascinated the world. To the Romans, she was a cautionary tale, foreign temptress who nearly brought down their empire. To later generations, she became a symbol of beauty, romance,